We live surrounded by voices, advice, opinions, recommendations, social rules, and amidst so much noise, there's a silent obsession that runs through almost everyone. How can I have more influence? How can I get others to respect me, listen to me, follow me? How can I make people want to be around me without having to force anything? And although today's world is full of communication tricks, persuasion techniques, and formulas for being more liked, there's one truth that almost no one mentions. Real influence isn't manufactured. It's embodied. It's lived. It radiates from within. The Stoics understood this more than 2,000 years ago. While many sought power through appearances, through noise, through social games, they cultivated it in silence, in virtue, in consistency, because they knew that deep respect isn't demanded. It's awakened, and that true persuasion isn't manipulating. It's living in such a way that others want to get closer to you, to understand how you do it. And the most curious thing is that if you analyze the people you admire most, who have the greatest impact, who radiate the greatest presence, most don't shout. They don't need to convince. They're not trying to be someone else. They simply live from their center, with clarity, with calm, with integrity. And that, although it may not seem like it, is pure Stoic persuasion. Today you will discover the 7 principles the Stoics practice to influence without seeking it, to create true connections, to attract others effortlessly, to become someone who feels close, not because you always agree, but because you inspire trust, you project direction, you radiate authenticity, and all of that can be trained. You don't need a loud voice or perfect aesthetics, not an overwhelming personality. You just need to live consistently and train your presence as if it were a virtue. That's what we're going to explore. Stoicism applied to relationships, philosophy alive in your way of speaking, acting, and listening, a path so that, without changing your essence, you become a natural reference for others. The first Stoic principle that makes you magnetic, without forcing anything, is this: own your emotions. It may sound simple, but in a world where almost everyone reacts before thinking, those who know how to contain themselves, process, and respond with temperance automatically become attractive. Why? Because they convey something that's lacking: security. Not a security imposed by force, but an internal security, a stability that is felt even when you don't speak. An emotionally strong person isn't the coldest. They're the most trustworthy, because you know they won't explode without warning. You know they don't break down at the first disagreement. You know they don't project their chaos onto others. And that generates respect. And respect, before sympathy, is the true basis of all influence. Epictetus said it very clearly. He who rages over external things shows that he has given his soul to others. And you, how many times have you surrendered your soul to a poorly spoken phrase, a senseless criticism, another person's reaction that triggered an old wound? The Stoic doesn't repress his emotion. He observes it, he experiences it, and then he decides. And that decision, to act from reason and not from emotional release, turns you into a figure of silent authority. One of those people who speaks little, but makes an impact, who don't correct with shouts, but with presence, who don't convince through logic alone, but through emotional example. This isn't about becoming a rock. It's about maturing your response, about giving yourself an extra second before speaking, about breathing before confronting, about noticing when your body is crying out for war, and you choose peace. And here's the most powerful detail. Most people are so dominated by their emotions that they don't notice the obvious. When you control yourself, when you remain calm, you become the leader of the room's energy. Your composure lowers the tone. Your composure organizes the conversation. Your pause interrupts the cycle of reactivity. That's influence without imposition. That's power without the need to dominate. And most valuable of all, it can be trained. Every time you choose not to respond impulsively, you are strengthening that muscle. Every time you breathe before acting, you are building presence. Every time you understand your emotion before expressing it, you are practicing real leadership. So start observing. Where do I lose control most easily? Which people trigger my most primitive emotions? What patterns do I repeat when I feel insecure? That's your practice area. That's where your real magnetism begins. The second principle of Stoic persuasion is one that many underestimate: listening with presence. Today, everyone wants to be heard, understood, validated, but almost no one knows how to truly listen. Listen without interrupting, without thinking about what you're going to respond, without wanting to correct, win, impress, or be right. Just listen to understand. And here's the key point. True listening is an act of generosity and personal mastery, because to listen well You need to silence your ego, your haste. You need to be noticed. And that, in a world of hyperexpression, is revolutionary. The Stoics practiced the art of silence as a virtue, not because they had nothing to say, but because they knew that those who speak less listen more, and those who listen more understand better. Seneca summed it up this way: when you listen, learn. When you speak, do so because it is necessary. But what happens when you apply this today in your relationships, in your environment? What happens is that you become rare, and because of that, memorable. You become the kind of person it's a pleasure to talk to, because you're not waiting for your turn to respond. You're present, truly. And that presence, that gaze that doesn't shy away, that pause that doesn't judge, is a more powerful form of influence than any well-crafted speech. Because it connects, it makes the other person feel seen. And in a world where almost no one feels seen, that's worth gold. But listen carefully to this. Stoic listening isn't passivity. It's directed attention. It's understanding before offering an opinion. It's knowing when the other person needs to vent and when they need direction. It's knowing when to remain silent and when to say just the right thing without embellishment. When you listen from this place, your opinion, when it comes, carries weight. Not because you speak loudly, but because you speak from understanding. And that's what you feel. People begin to trust you because you don't just say coherent things, but because you show them that you care about understanding rather than imposing. And this isn't a technique. It's a way of being in the world, a way of being with the other person without disappearing yourself. How do you train it? Every conversation can be your gym. Listen for 1 more minute before responding. Pause and repeat what you understood before giving your opinion. Look the other person in the eye, not at your phone, not at your watch. Small acts, but repeated, they make you magnetic. Because those who know how to listen become strange. And strangeness, when it's genuine, attracts. The third principle of Stoic persuasion is one that cannot be imitated or faked. Consistency. We live in an age where everything can be fabricated. Image, discourse, even emotion. But there is something that cannot be hidden for long. Inconsistency. When you say one thing, but do another. When you preach serenity, but live with anxiety. When you demand respect, but don't practice it. That shows. And even if no one says it, it can be felt. Consistency is magnetic because it transmits something that is in short supply. Trust. And trust, like respect, is not asked for. It is provoked. Epictetus taught it this way. Don't explain your philosophy. Live it. The Stoic doesn't need to convince anyone with grand arguments. Because that is already the argument. Because what he thinks, he says. What he says, he does. And what you do is sustained over time. That's consistency. And that's real influence. Do you want to be someone who inspires without forcing it? Start by asking yourself, is there a gap between what I say I value and what I practice? Does my lifestyle confirm or contradict my words? Do I act the same when I'm alone as when others look at me? These questions aren't easy, but the answers, if you face them honestly, give you back power. Because when you align your words with your actions, you no longer need to prove anything. Your mere presence communicates. And this isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. About being someone others know they can trust, because you don't improvise your values according to the situation. Do you know why this is so appealing? Because most people live in contradiction. Preach health, but neglect it. Preach peace, but feed on conflict. He demands honesty, but keeps quiet about his truth. When you decide to live coherently, you become a role model, not from a position of power, but from integrity. And that, for the observer, is irresistible. You don't need to explain much. You just need to practice in silence. Act firmly. Speak with intention. Keep your promises. And above all, don't betray yourself. Because those who don't betray themselves don't betray others. And that generates something rarer than admiration. Loyalty. Coherence generates deep, lasting, real bonds. Because people don't seek perfection. They seek truth. And when you live from it, they seek you. The fourth principle of Stoic persuasion is one of the most powerful and least exploited in our time. Real humility. Not feigned humility. Not that forced attitude of playing small to please. I'm talking about profound humility. The kind that comes from self-knowledge. The kind that doesn't need to show off. The kind that doesn't react from the ego because it's no longer trying to prove anything. Stoic humility isn't servility. It's inner strength. It's recognizing what you know without boasting, and recognizing what you don't know without being ashamed. It's being able to say, I don't know, or I was wrong, without your image crumbling. Because your value isn't in being right. It's in your ability to grow, to listen, to learn. Seneca put it bluntly. The wise man doesn't boast about what he knows. because he knows he still has much to learn. And in terms of persuasion, this has an immense impact. Because while most people compete for attention, you choose to lower the volume of your ego. And that, curiously, elevates you. Because authentic humility has a language of its own, one that is expressed in gestures, in silences, in the way you treat those who don't contribute anything to you. One that says, I don't need to stand out to be worth something. I'm not here to impress, but to contribute. I can have authority without imposing it. And what happens when someone embodies this? Others let their guard down. They relax. They open up. Because they don't feel like they're standing in front of a judge. They feel like they're standing in front of someone human, strong, yet approachable. Humility, well understood, builds bridges. And in a world saturated with performance, humble authenticity is captivating. And how you practice it? Start by observing your need to have the last word. Your impulse to show what you know. Your reaction when someone doesn't recognize your value. That's where the training lies. That's where humility is cultivated. Practice phrases like, you're right, I didn't see it that way. Can you help me understand your point? Thanks for correcting me. I'm still learning. And don't say it to look good. Say it because it's true. Because by saying it, you strengthen yourself. And by practicing it, you connect. Humility doesn't lower your value in the eyes of others. It deepens it. Because people don't remember the one who always won arguments. They remember the one who made them feel seen without feeling less. That is true power. The power of someone who has knowledge, but doesn't need to display it. The one who has confidence, but doesn't need to crush. The one who is light, but doesn't dazzle. It only illuminates. The fifth principle of Stoic persuasion is perhaps the most powerful of all. Influence by example. We live in an age of verbal excess. Everyone opines, analyzes, criticizes, teaches. But very few live what they say. And that creates a void of real figures. Figures who not only speak, but embody. The Stoic, by definition, doesn't need to convince. They don't need to constantly explain what they believe. Because they demonstrate it in every action, in their way of walking, of responding, of deciding, of maintaining silence. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the most powerful empire of his time, didn't write to be read. He wrote so he wouldn't forget who he wanted to be, not to teach, so he wouldn't betray himself. And that, precisely, is what makes someone magnetic. That their life confirms their values. That their daily practice validates their word. Do you want to be listened to more? Talk less. Act more. Do you want others to respect you? Respect your own decisions when no one is looking. Be punctual. Be loyal to what you said you would do. Be firm in what you know is right, even if no one applauds. Because an example isn't seen alone. It's felt. And the most striking thing is that it needs no explanation. When you live from order, others notice. They don't rationalize it, they perceive it. And that perception generates attraction. It creates trust. It inspires admiration. Think about those people who have truly impacted you. Was it because they said impactful things? Or because their way of being in the world showed you something you, too, wanted to be? That's real influence. An influence that doesn't push, that doesn't sell, that doesn't manipulate. It only radiates. And that is cultivated with practice, with repetition, paying attention to small actions. How you speak when you're frustrated. How you treat those who have no power. What you do when no one demands anything of you. What you choose when you could do the easy way. Each of these moments defines the type of energy you emit. And that energy is your calling card. Your level of charisma, your physique, your status doesn't matter. When you live with coherence, with humility, with mastery, your example opens doors that words cannot force. The sixth principle of Stoic persuasion is one that only reveals itself in moments of tension. Staying calm when others lose it. Because anyone can appear firm in times of peace. But true influence appears when there is chaos, when there is disagreement, when the atmosphere is charged. That's where the Stoic becomes a guide. Not because he has all the answers, but because his very presence orders the space. He doesn't shout. He doesn't dominate. He doesn't compete to impose his point of view. He remains. He observes. He thinks. And then he acts. Epictetus said it clearly. When you are insulted, think. If it's true, correct yourself. If it's not, ignore it. But never stoop to the tone of the one attacking you. That's not passivity. That's emotional mastery. It's refusing to enter the game of reactivity. It's understanding that whoever maintains internal control has the real power. And this shows in a family argument, in a tense meeting, in a conflict with your partner. When everyone is in defense mode, you can be the one who breathes, the one who listens, the one who holds the line. And that, even if you don't say it, makes you a role model. Because anyone who has the courage not to return the heat, who can take criticism without exploding, who can listen without interrupting. Become someone with natural authority. And people gravitate toward that energy, not out of fear, out of respect. And how do you train this? Start with small tests. When you feel the urge to talk down to someone, breathe. When provoked, ask yourself, is it up to me what that person feels? When confronted with someone else's mistake, choose tone over reason. That doesn't mean withholding truths. It means speaking them from a firm, non-reactive place. It means choosing the moment, the words, the intention. Because the Stoic doesn't shy away from conflict. They transcend it. And in that transcendence, they become magnetic. Because we're all, deep down, looking for someone who knows how to weather the storm without becoming part of it. And you can be that person, not through perfection, through practice, through the awareness that true leadership is emotional. And when you master your reaction, you master your energy. And when you master your energy, others follow you, even if they don't ask. The seventh principle of Stoic persuasion is to live with purpose. Because you can have emotional control, know how to listen, act with humility, be consistent. But if you don't know why you're doing all that, your energy is dispersed. You become effective, yes, but empty, present, but directionless. And the truth is simple. Nothing attracts more than a person with meaning. A person who doesn't need to explain themselves all the time. Because their life, their habits, their language, their priorities already communicate the essential. Marcus Aurelius woke up every day remembering this. You were made for meaningful action, not for pleasure or recognition. Do your part, do it well, and move on. The Stoic lives with purpose, not to be admired, but to make their life worth living. And when you do that, others feel it. Not because you say so, but because your energy has a clear direction. You're not trying to impress. You're building. You're serving something bigger than your ego. And that's magnetizing. Because in a world full of doubt, being around someone with direction is soothing. It doesn't have to be a grandiose purpose. It can be simple, but it has to be true. To care, to build, to organize, to serve, to create clarity. Your purpose is what gives meaning to your temperance, your humility, your listening. It's the reason behind your self-control. It's what justifies your silence when you might attack. It's what sustains your example, even when no one is looking. And that purpose shows. People don't just want to be around charismatic people. They want to be around people who lift them up, even if they don't say anything. People who, just by looking at them, remind you of who you could be. That's who you are when you live with purpose. When you decide that every day is an opportunity to act with virtue, not with perfection, with intention. And how do you find that purpose? It's not found. It's revealed. When you clear the noise. When you stop living according to the expectations of others. When you pay attention to what you do, even when no one forces you. When you connect with what you would do, even if no one applauds it. That's where your real influence begins. When you stop acting to please and start living to serve something worth more than your image. That silent direction, that why that isn't shouted, is what makes you magnetic. Not because you pull everyone along, but because your very presence invites them to look within. And whoever awakens that gaze in others has understood the deepest form of persuasion. Now that you've learned the 7 principles of Stoic persuasion, the real question isn't do you understand them, but are you living them? Because real influence isn't created in a day. It's not a pose you strike in meetings. It's a presence you build every day, from the smallest things to the most challenging. And for that presence to be solid, you need structure, not a list of rigid rules, but a framework that allows you to turn each principle into a consistent practice. Here's a simple map. 7 practices, 1 for each day. A weekly workout to become someone who influences without forcing and leads without imposing. Monday, emotional self-mastery. Start the week by training your pause. When faced with any provocation, a message, a comment, an unexpected event, wait 5 seconds before reacting. Breathe, and then decide. Don't do it to show off. Do it to reclaim your power. Tuesday, radical listening. Make this day your gym for uninterrupted listening. Choose a conversation and listen as if what they say is the most important thing you'll hear today. Don't interrupt. Don't correct. Just understand and watch how the other person's energy shifts. Wednesday, coherence in action. Make sure everything you say today aligns with what you do. Underpromise. Deliver everything. And if you can't do something, say it clearly. Remember, every word that doesn't hold up weakens your internal authority. Thursday, active humility. Talk less. Ask more. Acknowledge what you don't know. Make room for other voices. Be generous with your silence. Today you don't lead from knowing. You lead from listening and acknowledging. Friday, silent example. Let your practice speak for you. Do the right thing even when no one expects it. Don't explain your decisions. Do them, and let whoever observes feel the difference. Saturday, serenity in conflict. Anticipate. Find an uncomfortable, tense, or reactive situation, and practice maintaining your center. Breathe more slowly. Lower your tone, not out of submission, out of clarity, because he who doesn't let himself be dragged down commands a space. Sunday, present purpose. Do something that only makes sense to you, something that connects with your highest vision. It might be writing, walking, helping, caring, creating, but do it knowing why you're doing it, not to be seen, to remind yourself who you are. This weekly map isn't an obligation. It's a guide, a way to train your energy, to polish your character, to become someone who, without seeking it, inspires others to live better. And remember, Stoic persuasion doesn't seek followers. It creates role models, people who, through their balance, generate impact. Through their consistency, they inspire trust. And through their virtue, they inspire silent admiration. Practicing Stoic persuasion is transformative, but it's also challenging, because the moment you begin to live with more clarity, with more coherence, with more mastery, the world notices. And it doesn't always react with admiration. Sometimes it reacts with discomfort, because your stable presence exposes the instability of others, because your firm silence contrasts with the common noise, because your discreet example dismantles excuses, and that, even if you don't say it, is uncomfortable. The Stoics knew that the path of virtue isn't always popular. Seneca warned without softening it. He who lives according to reason will often live against the opinion of the world. And if you decide to live with purpose, to listen more than to speak, to avoid impulsive reactions, they will say you're cold, that you think you're superior, that you lack passion, that you should participate more in the drama, the games, the noise. This is where your true focus is tested, because it's not enough to practice these principles when everything is flowing. The important thing is to sustain them when no one applauds them. How do you do that? First, accept the initial discomfort. Feeling out of place doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're breaking away from a common social pattern. And that hurts a little at first, but it's part of the process. It's not isolation, it's purification. Second, observe the judgment without absorbing it. When someone criticizes you for setting limits, for not reacting, for not playing along with the noise, ask yourself, is this judgment coming from someone who lives the way I want to live? If the answer is no, acknowledge the opinion and move on, because you don't need to defend your path to someone who hasn't yet understood theirs. Third, remember that the deepest recognition is invisible. Not everyone will understand you, but many will observe you. And sooner or later, someone will tell you, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you make me feel at peace. Thank you for not reacting like everyone else. Your way of being helps me think. That's the real impact. The one that isn't measured in likes. The one that isn't shouted out. The one that transforms without spectacle. And fourth, surround yourself, even if it's little by little, with people who value silence. Calm. Consistency. You don't need many. Just 1, 2, 3 people with whom you can practice the truth without having to justify yourself. That small network can sustain you when the world screams too loudly. Stoic persuasion doesn't make you immune to judgment. It makes you independent of it, not because you become arrogant, but because you learn to choose your peace over approval. And from that freedom, you emit the most magnetism, because there's something deeply attractive about someone who doesn't betray themselves just to fit in. Everything we've explored so far, the 7 principles, the practices, the resistance to judgment, only makes sense if you can embody in your daily life, not in speeches, in your manner of being, because that's Stoic persuasion, a silent energy that is transmitted from how you enter a space, how you hold someone's gaze, how you speak when you disagree, how you set a boundary without raising your voice, how you make others feel, even when you're not saying anything. Let's bring this down to practice with clarity. Here are concrete examples, real-life situations, where you can live your philosophy without explaining it. 1. You enter a room where there's tension. Most people pick up on it. They speed up. They get defensive. But not you. You breathe. You walk slowly. You sit quietly. You listen before you speak. And in that simple gesture, your mere presence changes the atmosphere. Because you're not being reactive. You're present. And it feels that way. 2. You receive unfair criticism. Your impulse is to defend yourself, explain yourself, counterattack, but you choose silence. A pause, a firm, calm phrase. Thanks for your opinion. I'll look into it. That's not weakness. It's dominance. And that restraint gives you authority, not because of what you said, but because of what you chose not to say. 3. Someone demands your time without respect. Before, You said yes out of commitment. Today you say no, but you do it with presence, not from anger, from clarity. I can't help you right now. I need to respect my priorities. And you don't justify yourself because your energy already says you take yourself seriously. 4. In a conversation, someone constantly interrupts you. You don't rush to get your turn back. You don't raise your voice. You wait. When your time comes, you speak calmly. And if necessary, you say, I'll finish the idea, and then I'll listen to you. Without needing to impose yourself, you position yourself. Because you're not competing to speak, you're consciously directing the pace. 5. Someone overly flatters you. You don't puff yourself up. You don't act falsely humble. You just respond, thank you. I'm focused on continuing to learn. And that's it. Humility with firmness. Presence without ego. Each of these examples is a training. They're not ways to look good. They're ways to not betray yourself. To choose to act from virtue in the concrete. Because that's where your influence is consolidated. Not on social media. Not in books. In the way you move through everyday life. And that doesn't happen through imitation. It happens through repetition. Through daily practice. By living as if no one were watching. And still deciding to do it well. Practicing Stoic persuasion doesn't just transform how you behave. It transforms who you are. And from there, it also changes how others perceive you, respond to you, and follow you. What at first were small gestures, a pause, a glance, a firm no, a contained emotion, are becoming a new language. A language that isn't taught with words, but that everyone understands. The first transformation occurs within you. You become lighter, because you're no longer acting to be liked. You're no longer investing energy in controlling the uncontrollable. You're no longer responding to every provocation, nor seeking to fill voids with other people's approval. You're centered, you're sober, you're present, and that gives you back something that can't be faked. Peace. That peace isn't passivity. It's focused energy. It's knowing that, even if everything outside is in turmoil, you have an inner place to return to. And that radiates out. Suddenly, people begin to trust you more, to ask you for advice, to feel safe around you. Not because you have all the answers, but because you don't need to disguise yourself to be there. Your emotional clarity becomes a refuge. Your ability to listen, a magnet. Your consistency, a silent example. Your temperance, a guide for those who still live in reaction time. And this has a profound impact. The dynamics change. Arguments diminish in tone when you don't participate in the discussion. People correct themselves when they see you're not participating in the judgment. People elevate their language when you elevate your presence. And, even if they don't tell you, many will begin to copy you. To adjust their behavior when you're around. To question their own reactions when they see how firmly you hold yours. That's not ego. It's real influence. An influence that doesn't manipulate, push, or seduce. One that inspires. And the best part, you're not doing anything extra. You're just living in order. With direction. With purpose. With mastery. Stoic persuasion is the most powerful because it's not imposed. It's offered. And it's earned. With presence. With perseverance. With virtue. And that, even if you can't measure it, accumulates. Over time, you'll notice that. Your relationships deepen. Your environment becomes clearer. Your mind becomes more serene. And you become stronger without hardening. That's the reward. A life where influencing isn't a strategy. It's a consequence of your integrity. Every profound path has moments of doubt. Days when you wonder if it's worth it. If it makes sense to maintain focus, mastery, and temperance. When the world rewards exaggeration, reaction, and spectacle. Days when no one notices your effort. When you feel like acting calmly isolates you. That staying centered leaves you out of many conversations, groups, or social dynamics. And that weighs on you. But this is where Stoic thinking becomes most necessary. When you don't feel like it. When your environment isn't cooperating. When external validation fades. And all that remains is your will to continue being who you chose to be. Because the magnetism of virtue isn't immediate. It's cumulative. And often, silent. The Stoics didn't wait for applause. They waited for the opportunity to train amidst chaos. And when adversity came, they didn't become demoralized. They reminded themselves of the essential. Marcus Aurelius, in the darkest days of his empire, wrote, "Return to yourself. No place offers more peace than your own soul. If you cleanse it, that is your refuge, your center, your foundation. But how can you sustain that strength when everything screams at you to slow down? 1. Return to the bare minimum. When you're exhausted, don't seek perfection. Do the essential. Take a breath before answering. A no said with respect. A coherent decision, even if it's uncomfortable. That's enough. because every small coherent act strengthens your identity. And identity, when sustained, renews your energy. 2. Remember who you're loyal to. When you doubt, don't think about what others will say. Think about who you were before starting this path, about how much you've grown, about what you no longer accept, about what you promised yourself. Your loyalty isn't to the comfort of the moment. It's to your most lucid version. 3. Accept that discomfort is part of the training. It's not that you're failing. It's that you're strengthening your threshold, your ability to sustain yourself when everything tries to pull you off center. And every time you succeed, even just barely, you're leveling up. That's also persuasion. When others see you resist without hardening, they want to know how you do it. 4. Rewrite. The Stoics wrote so they wouldn't forget who they were. Do the same. 1 sentence a day, a reminder, a summary of your intention, something to anchor you when emotion or fatigue try to win. And if one day you get overwhelmed, get off track, contradict yourself, don't see it as a defeat. See it as a reminder, a point of return. Because this path isn't measured by how many times you don't fall. It's measured by how many times you return. And if you return with greater awareness, that's not a step backward. It's evolution. This whole path, the practice of the 7 principles, silence in the face of judgment, consistency in your daily life, leads you to something much deeper than simply being liked by others. It leads you to redefine what it means to be influential. Because influence isn't having many followers. It isn't capturing everyone's attention. It isn't filling a space with noise, charisma, or words. Influence, in a Stoic sense, is something else. It's being a reference, a point of stability in an unstable environment, a person who conveys confidence without demanding it, who radiates respect without asking for it, who inspires without needing to convince. That is real attraction, not the kind that depends on what you appear to be, but the kind that is born from what you embody. And when you live like this, without realizing it, you change the logic of your relationships. People approach you based on how close they feel, not on what you give or say. Your mere presence makes others lower their guard, not out of weakness, but out of confidence, out of calm, out of clarity. And that attraction is lasting because it's not born of encouragement. It's born of consistency. You're not seeking to please. You're living with direction. And that makes you attractive in a strange, almost inexplicable way. Because in a world where everyone is running to be seen, those who act without needing to be seen shine differently. Your example begins to make those who live on automatic uncomfortable, but also awakens them. And without saying it, without planning it, you become someone others look to when everything else gets blurry. That's the legacy of living with virtue. You become a silent beacon, not to guide from above, but to illuminate from within. And that kind of magnetism doesn't fade. It doesn't need updating. It doesn't depend on trends. It doesn't fade with age, because it doesn't come from outside. It comes from who you choose to be. And if you've made it this far, you already know something important. You don't need more techniques, more masks, more effort to impress. You need less noise, more focus, and the firm decision to practice who you are, even when no one is looking. Now you can see the whole map. These aren't tricks. These aren't manipulation. These aren't social strategies. These are character. These are a way of being in the world that transforms first your inner self, and then everything you touch. Let's go back to the 7 principles, not as theory, but as a portrait of the kind of person you're becoming. 1. Emotional self-mastery. You are someone who doesn't react on impulse, who contains without repressing, who observes without giving in to chaos. When others are overwhelmed, you hold on. 2. Deep listening. You are someone who doesn't interrupt in order to shine, who listens not to respond, but to understand. Someone who knows that sincere silence can be more persuasive than a brilliant argument. 3. Radical coherence. You don't need to explain your integrity, because you already live it. What you say is a reflection of what you do, and that gives you a strength that cannot be faked. 4. Conscious humility. You know you don't know everything, who accepts correction without losing your dignity, who learns quietly and grows without needing applause. 5. Example in motion. You don't define yourself by your opinions, but by your actions. Your life is your argument, and that inspires effortlessly. 6. Serenity in the face of conflict. When others get upset, you become a reference, not because you know everything, but because you know how not to lose yourself in the noise. 7. Embody purpose. Your energy is not scattered. It has a direction. You live for something that transcends pleasure or success, and that makes you magnetic. Now, imagine practicing this not for a week, not for a month, but every day. With mistakes, yes. With falls, of course. But always returning to you, to your center, to your decision to live virtuously. Can you see the difference? You're not trying to convince. You're trying to be. And that, even if no one tells you so, is felt. And it leaves a mark. The world already has enough loud voices, image-driven leaders, and empty speeches. What it needs now is strong presences. People who talk less, but live better. And you could be one of them. Not through demands. Through practice. Through the decision to stop acting like what's expected and start living like who you've truly chosen to be. If you've come this far, it wasn't by chance. It was a decision, a sign that you're ready for something deeper. Not just to improve your image, but to strengthen your character. Not just to be liked, but to live better. Because now you know, true persuasion is not in what you say, nor in what you pretend, but in how you live. In the firmness with which you hold back when you might explode. In the clarity with which you say no when you previously gave in. In the humility with which you accept learning, even when you might impose. In the silence you choose to understand, not to retreat. In the example you set, without seeking it. And if any of this resonated with you, if something in you clicked while you listened, if you felt that finally someone was speaking not to your ego, but to your center, then there is something you can do right now to continue walking together. Subscribe to the channel. Do it not on impulse. Do it if you truly want more content like this. Practical, profound, quiet, designed to help you organize your inner self and transform your outer self. And if this video brought you clarity, if it gave you tools, if it made you feel stronger inside, give it a like. It's a simple way of saying, this has value. And in doing so, you help this message reach others who also need it. And now I want to hear from you. Which of the 7 principles touched you the most? Which one do you want to start practicing this week? Let me know in the comments. Your process also inspires. And perhaps your experience is the spark someone else needs to begin theirs. Remember, you are not here to convince. You are here to embody, to become a firm, human, and conscious presence. That leaves a mark without imposing it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with your soul. See you in the next video. And until then, live like a Stoic, silently, but with direction, with temperance, but with impact, quiet, but impossible to ignore.